So this lesson is focusing on fractions and percents. I'm also going to be introducing the word ratio to you. And the word ratio is just a comparison of two numbers by division. And ratio is really just the same thing as a fraction. So my first example is turning a fraction into a percent. But unfortunately, we cannot go directly from a fraction to a percent. We have to first go from a fraction into a decimal, and then from that decimal into a percent. And you will see that with my examples that I'm going to do. So my first example is turning the fraction 9/20 into a percent. So I first have to turn it into a decimal. So because I know that 19/20, I know my denominator can go into 100 5 times, then I'm going to multiply my denominator by 5 and my numerator by 5. So I'm going to say 20 times 5 is 100. That was my goal, to make it 100. Now 19 times 5, I'll do it at the top here. 9 times 5 is 45. 5 times 1 is 5, plus 4 is 9, is 95. So now I have 95 hundredths. So now I can read it. Now I'm going to write it, 95 hundredths. Now I turn it into my decimal. Now, when I turn my decimal into a percent, all I have to do is move my decimal 2 spots to the right. So what I have to say is 95 hundredths, I'm going to move it 1 spot, 2 spots to the right. Now my decimal is not at the beginning of my 9, it's actually at the end. So I'm going to say 95 hundredths is the same as 95%, because my decimal is really right here, but with my decimal being at the end, we can just get rid of it. And then all I did was add that percent sign. So my answer is 95%. Now my next example is turning a percent into a fraction. So I'm going to say, for my next example, I'm going to turn 92% into a fraction. So my first job is to turn my percent into a decimal. Then I'm going to turn my decimal into a fraction. That's my first step, my second step. So in order to turn my percent into a decimal, I need to move my decimal 2 spots, and I'm going backwards this time to the left. So I have my 92%, and my imaginary decimal is right here. Notice how the last time I told you you could just take it away, but you still have to remember it's right there. And you're going to move it 1 spot, 2 spots to the left. So now 92% is the same as 0 and 92 hundredths. Now we have to turn into a fraction, and all you have to do in order to turn a decimal into a fraction is to read it. And then as always, you have to simplify your fraction. So I'm going to read this as 92 hundredths. I'm going to read it and I'm going to write it. Now I have to simplify it. Now you have to ask yourself, what numbers do they have, what factors do they have in common? Well, they're both even, so I can divide both the numerator and the denominator by 2. Well, I don't know 92 divided by 2 off the top of my head, so I'm going to say 2 goes into 9 4 times. I'm going to subtract and bring down. 2 goes into 12 6 times. So I can say 92 divided by 2 is 46. 100 divided by 2 is 50. They're both even again, so I can divide them again by 2. 46 divided by 2 is 23, and 50 divided by 2 is 25. Now from here I can say there are no other common factors besides 1 in both my numerator and my denominator, so I can say that this fraction is in simplest form. So I can now say that 92% is 23 over 25. And I am done. So if you notice, you first have to go from your percent to your decimal, and then you can go from your decimal to your fraction. My last example is using that word ratio that we talked about before. So if I ask you to write the ratio of 18 per 100 or 18 to 100, these are both how you write ratios using the word. You can use the word per, or you can use the colons. But what you have to realize is the word per and the colon is the same thing as a fraction bar. So you can rewrite this as 18 over 100 and 18 over 100. Notice the word per and the colon is the same thing as my fraction bar. So with these ratios, if I were to turn these into a percent, I can now say that 18 over 100 is written as 18 hundredths, and then I move my decimal 2 spots to the right, and then I can say that's 18%. So that's how you turn ratios into a percent. And that is it for my lesson today.